All right, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. Then the links to our future webinar sessions can be found on the SST events page. So there are 2 more sessions in the series. Those will be taking place next week, Tuesday and Thursday. If you haven't already registered for those, we really encourage you to do so. It's going to be a really exciting rest of the series to hear from all of our fantastic youth speakers. Then if you have any questions after today's session, you're welcome to email us at webinars@sstafrica.org.za, and we'll address those there. For now, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker for today, Tebogo, who's joining us from the UN, essentially, so representing the first of our African speakers in the series. So I'm just going to bring up the slides and then hand over to you, Tebogo.
Thank you so much, Tara, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tebogo Maleka, and I work as the National Project Coordinator at the United Nations Industrial Development Organization for a project called Support for Transitioning from Conventional Plastics to More Environmentally Sustainable Alternatives. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. Just to give you a background of the project, it's funded by the government of Japan. So the United Nations Industrial Development, in collaboration with the CSIR, which is the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, as well as Wits University, have implemented a project that aims to strengthen the capacities for plastics recycling, as well as support the implementation of the national guidelines for waste picker integration in South Africa. So this project forms part of a 3-year program to support South Africa's transitioning to more environmentally conservative or more environmentally sustainable alternatives to our single-use plastics. So as we know that rapid urbanization, which is facing developing countries, including South Africa, has come with a lot of consequential environmental challenges concerning solid waste management. So as it stands right now, it is estimated that South Africa alone generates about 41 kilograms of plastic waste per capita per year, which is compared to the global average of about 29 kilograms per year. And South Africa generates over 2.3 million tons of plastic waste, estimated at 107,000 tons of plastic waste leaks into South Africa's aquatic ecosystems. So we found that it's very important to conserve and sustain South Africa's freshwater resources through supporting South Africa's transition to more environmentally sustainable alternatives. So ultimately, this project aims to accelerate South Africa's development through the enhancement of recycling value chains, as well as provide business partnerships for recycling. Next slide, please. So if we're looking at the recycling statistics in South Africa, plastic recycling in South Africa does continue to grow, which is a good thing. It is more than 330,700 tons of plastic is recycled annually in South Africa. And the average plastic recycling rate of plastic exceeds 43%, which is also good, but it could become better. And South Africa sends about 92 million tons of plastic waste to its 826 landfill sites, which is less than 40% of the material that is sent to the landfill sites is actually recycled. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the overall objective of this UNIDO, CSIR, and WITS project is to ensure that the amount of plastic leaking into the marine environment is actually reduced. And this project consists of 2 outputs. So the first output is where we work directly with the CSIR, and this component of the project is to develop an action plan through the identification as well as pilot demonstration of opportunities for sustainable alternative material, including biodegradable plastics. And output 2 of the project is to facilitate training and capacity building for waste picker integration in South Africa, which will in turn advance key government priorities related to job creation, as well as alleviation of poverty within our informal sectors. Thank you. Next slide. So if we look at output 1 of the project, This is where we deal with the biodegradable materials that replace the single-use plastics. So what we did with CSIR is that we initially identified plastic products which alternatives could be considered based on the items that are leaking in the marine environment. So we looked at items such as straws, cutlery, as well as takeaway containers that you find from fast food restaurants. And we looked at ways of replacing single-use plastics with biodegradable options. We then prioritized these products through an application of a number of relevant criteria, and we extended the prioritization to our stakeholders. And we found that straws, cutlery, as well as the takeaway containers were the top 3 single-use plastics that were contaminating our environment. What we then did is then we revised the prioritization of products based on the stakeholder feedback, and we came up with a PLA, which is referred to the polylactic polymer, which is a biodegradable material. If you look at the image on your right here, we've got a material that is biodegradable, and we did a bottle out of it. And then if you look at it from day 1 up until the last day, that is what we call a life cycle assessment to determine exactly how long it will take for the material to biodegrade. What we also did is that we procured laboratory equipment that will test the compostability of products that are currently imported into South Africa, because we do get a lot of claims that an item is biodegradable, but how do we as South Africans test that the product that is imported from overseas is actually biodegradable? Thank you. Next slide, please. Output 2 of our project currently deals with the waste pickers, and currently in South Africa, it is estimated that we've got between 600,000 and 900,000 waste pickers who make a living from recycling mainline plastic recyclables, either from the streets or the municipal landfill sites. The waste pickers recycling activities are at the lower end of the recycling value chain, yet waste pickers play a vital role in the plastic recycling process. What we also found is that informal waste reclaimers contribute 90% of South Africa's recycling output by diverting waste material, specifically recyclable materials, from overflowing landfill sites. However, their contribution is not recognized. As UNIDO, as BITS, we've come up with a policy called the National Guideline for the Waste Picker Integration. And our role as UNIDO and BITS is to actually conduct capacity building and training activities, which not only assist the waste pickers with increasing their daily income through plastics recycling, but also move South Africa towards a circular and greener economy. And with this partnership, we are assisting in the piloting and upscaling on informal waste management integration. And we focus particularly on women as well as marginalized groups. Out of the 9 provinces in South Africa, we're currently working in 5 pilot sites. The first one being Paarl in the Western Cape, Botshabelo in the Free State, Sasolburg in the Free State, as well as Mooi River in KwaZulu-Natal. Those 4 pilot sites fall under the South African Waste Pickers Organization. We also work directly with the African Reclaimers Organization, which have a project running in Bordeaux as well as Brixton and Johannesburg, and that falls under the African Reclaimers Organization. With this project, what we also did is that we did conduct a webinar series where we pulled in stakeholders as well as the municipalities to see how they could contribute to actually implementing the guideline for waste picker integration. The main topics that we focused on under this webinar was integrating women waste pickers and how municipalities can actually partner with reclaimers, as well as integration of landfill reclaimers and ensuring that waste pickers are actually safe and do have access to landfill sites, because a lot of the recyclable materials is actually taken to landfill sites. Also, currently, UNIDO is also supporting the development of the National Waste Picker Guideline registration system, because we find that although we do have a lot of waste pickers in South Africa, they aren't registered on a database. And this database is currently funded by the National Treasury, and CSII is developing the system for South African waste pickers. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, this slide just gives you a brief of the key activities that take place during waste picker integration. The first one would be to map out the current status, because we found that the status of waste picker integration does differ from rural areas, peri-urban areas, and to your metro cities. So what we first do is that map out the current status and does the municipality actually play a role in waste picker integration? The second one is to design capacity building interventions, which do differ from rural areas to urban areas, because we found that the training needs do differ between waste pickers and municipalities in the rural areas compared to those in your metropolitan cities. The next thing is the implementation of the capacity building activities. And the next one will be the awareness development and outreach activities. We usually do bring in your key stakeholders there, which would be your PETCO, which offers training for plastics recycling. Thank you. Next slide. This slide here, it talks about waste picker support that we did between the year of 2020 and as well as 2021 when the COVID-19 pandemic hit. UNIDO did, let me start again. The United Nations initiative fell under the UN Environment-led National Stakeholder Platform aimed at extending the activities for safety and security for healthcare, specifically in the waste management during the pandemic. So we found that during level 4 and level 5 of the national lockdown, waste pickers weren't allowed to work and weren't considered essential workers, which was a major problem for us because, I mean, because of the lockdown, we found that a lot of plastic was accumulating in the environment due to the single-use plastic. And we found that waste pickers, although they were collecting the material during level 3, they were exposing themselves to the virus. So as the United Nations Industrial Development, what we did is that we provided waste pickers with PPE. As you can see here, it is branded in the organization logo, the South African Waste Pickers Organization, and we provided them with gumboots, gloves, as well as masks. Thank you. Next slide. Another thing that we did as the United Nations Industrial Development Association is that we did a needs assessment to find out exactly what were the limitations for waste pickers for them to increase their recycling capacities, specifically in the urban areas. As you can see here, we've got the African Reclaimers Organization, and their main issue is the form of transportation, to say that although they've got trolleys and bags, the potential to increase their capacity for plastic recycling would actually be much more if they're awarded a truck. So we did a needs assessment and we were able to procure 4 trucks, so 2 trucks to the African Reclaimers Organization, as well as 2 trucks to the South African Waste Pickers Organization to assist them in increasing their capacities for plastics recycling. Thank you. Next slide. As you can see here, the results from the trucks that were procured to the 2 organizations. So the capacities for plastic recycling has increased since the donation of the trucks. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, another thing that we are working on is the COCTA UN District Development Model, which was launched in 2021. Yes, so there was an agreement between the Department of Corporate Governance as well as the United Nations, where an MOU was signed. And the reason for the MOU is for the government to accelerate service delivery within the 3 pilot district sites. So the sites that we're currently working on is OR Tambo in the Eastern Cape, as well as Waterberg in Limpopo. And lastly is eThekwini in KwaZulu-Natal. So we did a needs assessment within the 3 districts because the 3 districts did complain that the major issue is youth unemployment and solid waste management and how jobs can actually be created from recycling plastic waste. What we did is that we did a capacity building and training programs for waste reclaimers within the 3 pilot sites. And the main objective is to promote jobs through the waste management sector and to form an inclusive and sustainable recycling value chain, which will obviously target vulnerable and marginalized communities, which not only includes unemployed youth, but people with disabilities, as well as women. And with this training as well, it will also increase and raise plastic collection rates, which will strengthen plastics recycling in the rural and urban areas in South Africa. Next slide, please. Thank you. We began our training in Limpopo in the Waterberg district, where we went to Bilabila as well as Tabazimbi, and our training was specifically focused for waste pickers. The training was aimed at, what we noticed is that a lot of in the rural areas, the focus is on peat recycling, and a lot of other plastics aren't considered. So the training, although it was aimed at peat recycling and collection, we also did a program on waste separation at source programs, because residential areas don't separate their waste, which ends up in the landfill sites. And the safety of waste pickers is actually compromised in the landfill sites because, municipality had a lot of issues. Some of the permits for the landfill sites weren't updated for about 10 years. They'd expired. There's no fencing. So the safety issues is a huge problem in those areas. So that's why we also did waste separation at source programs, so that we can educate the residents on separating the waste before it goes to the landfill sites, which will be easier for the waste pickers to identify. Another part of the training was to how can the waste pickers actually turn plastic waste into a profitable business, and because they see plastic recycling as just putting bread on the table. So we did educate them on how you can actually form a buyback center and expand your business from just collecting recyclable material from landfill sites. Another thing that we did is that we had training with the municipalities on how their integration with the waste pickers can actually increase the recycling rates within the municipality, which will actually contribute towards a green economy and increase the daily earnings of waste pickers. And overall, this entire UN project, in collaboration with the CSIR and UNIDO, contributes to the realization of the Asaka Blue Ocean Vision, which states that they want to reduce the amount of plastic leaking into the marine environment to 0 by 2020. Next slide, please. Thank you, and that brings me to the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Tebogo. That was really, really wonderful and encouraging to hear. Oh, good. I just wanted to check I was audible. It's great to hear the work that's being done, and it's really encouraging to hear the multifaceted approach that they're using for the different outcomes. I don't see any questions in the Q&A box yet, but you're welcome to send those through as we go, and we can address those after all of our speakers this morning have finished. Jeffrey, whenever you're ready, if you'd prefer to leave your webcam off just to keep your connection, that's no problem.
All right, thank you very much. So I'm Jeffrey Adusei Opuko. I'm from Ghana, and I got reached out to Anga from South Africa, and she actually spotted my activities, what I'm doing in terms of climate action and also plastics in Ghana. And I am actually, to present myself officially, I'm actually the co-president for Sustainability Week Accra. So the Sustainability Week Accra is a youth-led organization under the parent organization, which is Sustainability Week International, based in Switzerland. So the idea of the Sustainability Week is to raise awareness of sustainable lifestyle, promote education for sustainable development, and also promote climate literacy at the university level. This was because when I got to the university, I actually realized a lot of students didn't know about the SDGs. The lifestyle on campus was highly unsustainable, climate friendly. So this struck me to change the narrative, and also we can now in Nigeria, Tanzania, Morocco. All right, sure. So I think my introduction, everybody heard about the introduction. So to brief about the introduction, yes, I'm the co-president of Sustainability Week International, Sustainability Week Accra. And the idea of Sustainability Week is to promote climate literacy and climate education. And our focus is actually on university students to promote education for sustainable development. So in the slides that you see, we are actually supported by the Swiss Embassy in Ghana. And the first slide was, we did an Enrose climate simulator. This was to help young people understand how climate policies are actually designed. So what do we do when we want to flatten our emissions curve? What are the sort of policies? What are the sort of actions that young people and also the world leaders must take? So we also do tree planting exercises as part of a mitigation activity to flatten emissions curve. We also did one unique thing, which is known as a clothes swap. So I don't know how many of you know the idea of a clothes swap, which is the idea of the clothes swap is more of swapping good clothes instead of we dumping our clothes that we don't like maybe at the sea or the beach, where we actually burn them and also contributes to carbon emissions. So the clothes swap is more of targeted towards like eco-consumerism. So the Sustainability Week is basically a project targeted at the university level to promote education for sustainable development. Next slide, please. So as part of our efforts in advancing climate action in Ghana, we were actually recognized by the United Nations Environment Program Youth Group, which is UNMGCY. And I think earlier this year, UNEP was hosting its Environment Assembly. And as part of their environmental negotiations, they actually want young people to also, like mobilize young voices to feed in what they really want to see when we talk about climate action locally. So in Ghana, we are actually held the first local youth environment assembly in Ghana, which was hosted virtually and physically on the 23rd and 26th of February. So the idea of this was to develop a local youth position statement to mobilize young Ghanaians and know what is actually going on in Ghana, what are the environmental challenges going on in Ghana. Because then at the bigger picture, yes, climate action is what everybody wants to drive out. But then locally, we have several environmental challenges. And in Ghana, we realized that there were three major challenges that were facing the country in terms of environmental challenges, which was the fishery management, illegal mining, and climate education. So to elaborate on these thematic areas, which I say that they are the core environmental challenges in Ghana, which is the fishery management. So with the foreign illegality in Ghana's fishery sector, it's unfortunate we have like foreign people, especially the Chinese, where they come into the Ghana, and also they try to like fish or have vessels to have more fishes in their vessels. And what they do is mostly they use Ghanaians, local people, to front for them. So you would think that these organizations are actually Ghanaian owned. So, but however, behind is actually Chinese organizations who are actually doing this. So because they have the money, they have lots of vessels where they can actually have more fishes into their vessels. And this was really a disadvantage to the local fishermen, the fisher folks, who usually could not have so many fish to to sell, to make a living and all that. So it was actually depleting our fishing stock at the country level. So this was a challenge that I think we needed to deal with. And how was it possible for such people to have access to, to influence local people to front for them and also have more fishes in their vessel at the expense of we, the local people. So this was one of the challenges that we actually identified. The second one was illegal mining. And to me, I would say that one of the driving force for this illegal mining was youth unemployment. Because of that, most young people in the rural areas go into certain places to actually mine for gold. And while they are mining for gold, this actually destroys the land. And I mean, disaster risk reduction, this exposes our land and natural resources to disaster risk reduction. So disaster risk reduction was also very low when at the country level. So when people are actually mining, then it's actually makes climate crisis really a big topic. Second, the last thing was climate education. It's quite unfortunate because localization of climate crisis was really, really low. But when I think I once attended a consultation workshop where we had a country negotiator for UNFCCC, and yes, on paper, Ghana has actually integrated climate education into the national education curriculum. But then, if you go out and have a talk with young people, school children, or even at the university level, what climate crisis is, what climate action is, then they have limited knowledge about it. They cannot even tell you they have limited knowledge about it. So in paper, yes, we have integrated climate education, but in reality, when you meet young people in Ghana and you ask them, or you try to have a conversation on climate action, then you cannot have a meaningful conversation. So climate education was really, really low. So these were the three thematic areas that we sought to address. Next slide, please. So yes, I also wanted to highlight on the state of climate change at the national front. And this were some of the few activities that I actually wanted to share. There are actually more. I think in Ghana, we are actually doing the Scaling Up Renewable Energy Program. And this is a program by the Climate Investment Fund. And it's targeted at low-income countries, which is, yes, funded by the Climate Investment Fund. So the core objective of the Scaling Up Renewable Energy Program is to scale up the deployment of renewable energy solutions and expand the renewable energy markets in low-income countries. So in Ghana, I think the Swiss government and the African Development Bank are actually supporting Ghana to deploy more renewable energy products. And I think we have the Sheer Landscape Emission Reduction Project. And this project is aimed at addressing the alarming deforestation and forest degradation challenges in the northern savanna zone of Ghana, while also promoting the share value chain in Ghana. And this project is funded by the Green Climate Fund. And I think we have a young negotiation capacity building support program, which is really, really significant. And I'm really happy to see the Ministry of Environment and the EPA embarking on this project. So then we have, the COPs, the Conference of Parties, the Conference of Youth, and also the SBs in Bonn, Germany. And it's very, very significant to position African youth for these conferences to negotiate on behalf of the country's needs in the sphere of climate change. So I think this year, I was glad to see one young person from Ghana who was sponsored to attend the SBs in Bonn to also have how these negotiations actually go on. Because then when you try to go to COP and all these conferences and you don't go with a goal, you actually get lost. So it's very, very important that young people are actually exposed to these conferences and this negotiations program so that we can actually negotiate on behalf of our country. And we have the country financing roadmap for the SDGs, which is more of SDG financing, and definitely climate SDG 13 is part of the SDGs, so definitely it's had a bit of climate financing in it. So mobilizing financial resources to achieve the SDGs is significantly important. We can have all the ideas, all the projects, but we need the money to translate all these ideas into action. And it's quite unfortunate. I mean, Africa, due to our low tax to GDP ratio, domestic resource mobilization has been really, really difficult for us for the past decades. And also looking at our debt levels rising. For example, climate action. Yes, the science has confirmed Africa needs to adapt to climate action. Adaptation is very, very important. Ghana is not exclusive. We are part. But then when you look at adaptation financing, now where is the money? Now we need adaptation financing where developed countries has actually pledged to developed countries have pledged to mobilize $100 billion annually to help us address climate crisis. But then even with that, is becoming a challenge. So then, how do we actually advance climate change? And the sad part of it all is adaptation finance to Africa are in the form of loan. This is, I think, about 57%. So then, if we all, as the whole, let's say globally, if we are all able to flatten our emissions curve to 1.5 degrees Celsius, then that means Africa will have a high debt level. Then we are back again as a third world country trying to keep up with the development race. So the financing roadmap is one of the things that Ghana is actually doing, and I think it's really, really important. Climate financing is really, really, really important. I think last I would like to share is the landscape restoration program, and this is to strengthen the natural resource management and increase benefit to communities who are actually at the forefront of our natural resources. Next slide, please. So still on the state of climate change at the national front, but from a youth perspective, not at the governmental level, because most of these projects, right? Most of these projects, the big projects, and most of the money for climate action are mostly geared towards the government. You talk about World Bank, the UN. You can mention the intergovernmental organizations. I think I can say that most of the money are directed to the government to drive climate action, but a few are actually geared towards young people to drive climate action. Very few. So I would say from a youth lens, what are the activities going on? fortunately, we have established a Youth Climate Council in Ghana. So the Youth Climate Council is more of like a coordinating organization that is coordinating all environmental groups and individuals to position ourselves as one voice, as one people, and we have one goal, which is to drive environmental sustainability and also fight climate change at a country level. So I think the Youth Climate Council, the idea of a Youth Climate Council, I think is spreading across. I think it's really popular in the European country, and I think as Africans, I think this is something we also need to be doing, because mostly it's more of like a competition. You have these environmental groups competing with each other. So it's very important for us to position ourselves as one people to address climate change. So we have established a Youth Climate Council in Ghana, which is being supported by the UNICEF in Ghana. So there has been an upward surge in climate advocacy among Ghanaian youth. I think climate action is improving in Ghana. A lot of young people are getting aware of it. A lot of young people are getting into the space. And I think it's a very, very, very positive thing. Yes, so for example, one of the core objectives of the Youth Climate Council was to position Ghanaian youth towards the COP. When we go to COP, what do we want? Because I actually, from experience, not from experience, but then from a consultation workshop where we had certain young people who attended COP26 last year, they came to share their experiences on what actually happened. So you realize that one of the examples they highlighted was the young people from the US. They were very, very, very coordinated, and they knew what they want. So we need to go with a purpose. What do we want from this negotiation? What do we need? So it's very, very important for us to really position ourselves united in unity and divided we fall, right? So what are the hurdles that we are facing as part of young people in Ghana? And I think young people are in West Africa and Africa can actually they can actually relate to this sort of hurdles. Lack of sufficient financing for climate-related projects. As I said, most of the funding goes to the governments, right? But then we have a problem with our governments ourselves, where there are issues of corruptions and a whole lot climate apathy among government leaders. Because when you talk of climate action, adaptation, and mitigation, this really have long in-term impact. And politicians really want short-term impact, because then they have a few years to run for another elections, and they need short-term stuff for their manifesto. So you have a lot of politicians who don't really care about the climate crisis, but because mostly these climate interventions will have a long-term impact. And also climate education, as I said, is very, very low due to poor localization of climate crisis. When you outside the capital town of Accra, when you go into rural areas, the old women, old men, young people in the rural areas, they really need to understand what climate crisis is. We need to localize all this climate thing that we are doing. We need to localize it for them to understand and also take part. It's very, very important for us to work with the communities when we want to advance climate action at the country level. I think that will be the end of my slides.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. I see there was a comment here in the chat from Anga for your presentation, Jeffrey, saying if you don't get lost, if you don't go with a goal, you will get lost, which is definitely very true. There's a lot to be said for a strategic approach for the outcomes that you're looking for. We're going to move now to our panelist inputs and then to our Q&A section. So Ken, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and then perhaps commenting on both Tebogo and Jeffrey's presentation. So Ken, who's our panelist today, is an environmental engineer, writer, communication and media activist. So we're very grateful to have him here today to a bit of more input into today's proceedings and to provide a bit of feedback.
Greetings, everybody. First of all, I have to thank the organizers of this program. Me being part of this program, I have been able to get some questions because I circulated the flyers, and a lot of questions have been coming in since then. I told them I'm not the organizer. You have to meet Anga and others. They are the organizers. Somebody from the United Nations Development Program told me, "Oh, you will have an African youth waste system," because most times they don't believe we have some of these things. So it's always good we project our voice. Thank you so much. My name is Ken Ugwu. The host has done the introduction. So I have to thank the speaker, Tebogo and Jeffrey. They did a whole lot of things here. But I have to say something. I don't know if anyone here participated in this Stockholm Plus 50, because an issue was raised. Somebody made a comment about Africa being the most vulnerable continent, and we all believe. But on the other hand, they also believe that we are not doing anything. But based on the presentation the first speaker and the second speaker has made, you see that you are doing a whole lot. And it's time we have to put our voices so high so that they will know that the most vulnerable continent is also doing something. Even after this section, I also like this particular thing to go as much viral. Let them see what we have on ground. We are really doing something, even though we are affected. So with regards to what the first speaker said, she talked about recycling. Coming from Nigeria, where I came from, recycling seems to be something that is good. I just have to make some suggestions and also provide alternative for us to always make our work easier. Recycling is good, but we'll discover that the cost is so high here. Because whatever we are doing, we are trying as much as we can to cut waste and also to cut cost. Recycling is good. But what we've been able to do in Abuja, where I stay, is that we discovered that we couldn't do much of recycling. We now embarked on what we call the local activism and climate awareness, because most of the problem we've been having here is that most persons don't really know about climate change. I'm sorry to say, if I should say, I'm almost like one of the first generation speakers or the pioneers of climate change here in Nigeria. It always sounds weird when I say that, but that's the simple truth. You talk about climate change, somebody will just be moping at you. So the major work we even need to do is more of the education, the climate literacy, the awareness, the local activism. And with regards to what Tebogo said, she talked about plastic, single-use plastic. Let me tell you something. Most of the plastics that we are using here are imported. Most of the waste here comes from Europe, because we are much of an import-based nation. Most of our waste come from Europe. And that's the reason why we're doing as much as we can in Nigeria to tell the government, let's start producing. Let's start producing. Because the waste that is littered over Africa, in the Atlantic Ocean and a whole lot in our rivers are imported waste. Africa is almost like a refuse dump. So it's also good that if we can, with the youths, let's try as much as possible, engage the parliaments, not just even engaging. Last year, we were talking about telling our leaders or those representing us in the parliament to do something like this, talk about reducing the importation distance. But we discover these people are not really responding. Our own generation is different for what they are doing. And it's quite unfortunate we don't have good leaders here. I keep saying it. What we did now, Nigerian election is next year, February. What most of us did is we started picking forms to contest, because the youth are 70% of the Nigerians' 220 million population. The youth are 70%. We can win, and let's say we're going to win that election. We tell them about climate change. They are not saying anything. So we are deciding to participate in the governance ourselves. And some of us are going to get the ticket, possibly win the election. And then when we go there, we move the action. We don't have to depend on some persons again. And when we get there, we're going to do as much as possible to make sure that we are a producing economy, not an import-based nation. And this will help us to reduce the number of plastics that is coming in here, so that our place wouldn't be more of a refuse dump. This is a way we can checkmate on this, trying to cut some of these things. We know that plastic doesn't decay. The maximum time you can use a plastic is just 25 minutes, and that's all. And it takes almost 100 to 500 years before it decays. Plastic is one of the major issues we are having here with regards to what the first speaker said. We'll try as much as possible, instead of going for the plastic bag, what we've been doing, what we call the door-to-door sensitization program in Nigeria here. We tell people, madam, since you know, why don't you go for a paper bag instead of plastic bag? Most times we even share some of these things. And even the paper bag is even cheaper. Here in Nigeria, the paper bag is cheaper, but I don't know why the people are going for the plastic instead. So we'll be able to succeed in that angle. So I would like the first speaker, if people can also adopt this particular method, go for the paper bag not plastic. If you people can share, it's cheaper. And most of them are locally made. Most of them are locally made. And you talked about material substitution, which I've already emphasized on. And also your wake picker support system is a very nice one. But most of this thing comes with fund. I don't know how you are being funded. Okay, you want to say something, the host?
I wasn't too sure if you were asking Tebogo how they're funded, but I believe they're under the UN umbrella. But just to chime in there, the plastic versus paper bag debate is typically depends on one's circumstances, because in a lot of rural areas they can get more use out of plastic bags. It's more recyclable, they're more lightweight. So I think in those kind of situations it depends far more on how it will be used. But yes, I see we had a question that came through, but it seems to have been answered. I see, Jeffrey, it seems that you typed your answer. So if anyone does have any questions, you're welcome to send those through in the Q&A box now. But before we, but while those are coming through, we do have some already for Tebogo specifically. So what can you comment on your experience has been like working with such high unemployment rates in Africa, and your work specifically promoting job creation in the waste management sector?
Okay, thank you. I'll just answer that, as well as a couple of questions that Ken threw my way indirectly. Let me just start with the import of plastic waste that is coming in, well, plastic material that is coming into South Africa. Yes, a lot of the organizations or companies that are bringing in or producing plastic in South Africa, we're having a discussion with the Department of Environmental Affairs, and it's something called the extended producer responsibility. So what we're saying as the UN, as well as the Department of Environmental Affairs, is that if you're producing plastic and it can't be recycled, then it shouldn't be produced at all. And if you are actually producing plastic and it can be recycled, then there's something called a responsibility fee or a tax fee that needs to be implemented. And that will be given to the waste pickers as a source of generating their income. So that is something that we are working on as the UN, as well as other stakeholders in the plastics manufacturing industry. Safripol, for one, is a company that manufactures plastic, and their slogan is plastic responsibility. So they are working to say that if we are actually manufacturing the plastic, then we are doing something about it. And on the issue of single-use plastic bags, as opposed to your paper bags, South Africa has something called a levy, a plastics levy fee. So if you are using a plastic bag, then you actually pay for it you actually have to purchase a plastic bag, so it's not free in our country. And the reason for that is that the cost implementation that comes with the actual plastic, it shows that the plastic can actually be recycled, and it actually hits the consumer's pocket to say that if you are purchasing plastic, then it can be reused instead of it being a single-use plastic. If you look at a lot of our retail stores, for instance, Woolworths or Pick n Pay, a lot of their plastic bags actually have a huge print on them that says, please recycle me. So a lot of work is actually being done with regards to the plastics issue in South Africa. And if we're talking about the issue of climate change, yes, I do understand that it's a huge issue that affects a lot of African countries. And I feel and believe that African issues should be dealt by Africans. But when it comes to climate change, it's not just change in weather patterns, but a lot of contributing factors actually play a role in that contribute to the actual climate change issue. And we found that recycling actually is a huge, the high unemployment rate in South Africa, especially for young people, that's a way for them to actually make money and make a living out of recycling plastic bags. So recycling for us is a way of creating jobs in the waste sector. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tebogo, for the comments there and your response to the questions. Jeffrey, I hope your internet connection is still stable. I just wanted to quickly go into what was it that made you shift your focus to have such a big drive to further climate activism and focusing on climate change issues and the SDGs in Ghana.
So basically I started environmental activism at the age of 17 at a pretty early stage. And my first community project was about plastics. So then I was going to community schools to provide environmental education and also provide like segregation bins. And there were this people who like pick plastic bottles on the ground. So then the idea was to connect them to the schools where they can actually have easy collection, where they sell these plastics to the recycling firm at a minimal fee. So that is how I actually started. And going to the university, as I said, a lot of students, the lifestyle on campus was highly unsustainable. So that changed my whole narrative. And, you know, before I started embarking on a project about plastics, the issue of plastics was already in existence. That means at the age of 17, and today I would say I'm 22, and still the plastics is still plastics pollution is still a major problem. So I think there is a debate about is it a matter of individual action or governmental action? And because a lot of I've worked with a few environment NGOs and are on plastic projects, and you know, a lot of environment NGOs really focus on plastics, but then the problem is still existing. So to me, I feel this to drive plastic away is the government really need to come in. Individual action is necessary but not sufficient. Individual action is necessary but not sufficient. So it's time that the government, our leaders needs to. It's a matter of leadership. It's high time they really come into the scene and drive away plastics. I've seen the discussion about recycling. Recycling is good, but then recycling is really expensive and not profitable. So you don't have a lot of private sector people going to recycling. A very few people do recycling, and governments wouldn't like to put their money into recycling because they cannot make so much money out of recycling. So the recycling itself in Ghana is not really profitable, and it's a major issue. And already we were trying to embark on ban a single-use plastic. I think Rwanda and Kenya, I don't know if I'm right, but I'm hearing that Rwanda and Kenya have been successful in banning them. But in Ghana, I mean, our leaders came out saying they are not ready to ban single-use plastic because they make money out of it. So it's a really difficult situation. I think this is a matter of leadership. Young people have been doing their best to drive away the plastics. But then if the government has already come out saying that they are not ready to ban plastics, it's really going to be a tough challenge. So there is why my attention, to answer your real question, the reason why I really move on to climate change as a bigger picture was because, as I said, I mean, young people are really doing their best, but then I think it's time that we actually put pressure on our leaders to really advance what they are doing. So I actually didn't like the idea. I can't do anything about it, but then most of these climate projects, these big time projects, are really geared towards the government level rather than young people or private sector. So they are mostly geared towards the government level, and they always have the money. For example, I think one of the projects I mentioned, the Ghana land share, was worth $53 million. All this money going to the government, and we have people, other governments, who try to, I mean, they try to play smart and not to use the whole money for the project and also pocket some. So it's very significant that young people need to be very attentive and also put pressure, demand accountability from our leaders. So yes, so that's why I'm actually my drive is towards climate change, and also on a bigger picture, Africa is already disadvantaged. I think Ken was already talking about how plastics are imported. And the lady who just spoke also said that African problem should be, I don't know, I can't remember the statement, but it was more of like Africans should tackle their own problems. Like African problems should be tackled by African people, which is significant. When you look at our history in the 1960s, where Africa as a continent was trying to embark on an import substitution industrialization strategy, it actually failed. But unfortunately, it's actually failed. But then we had the IMF and the World Bank coming in with the IMF program with policy conditions, and one of the conditions that came was trade liberalization, free market system, and that was when importation really started. Then you look into your room, you realize that everything in your room is being imported. So it's very, very important that we need to, and I think one of the challenges was that the strategy that the IMF World Bank brought in the 1960s Africans had less input into it. So then you realize that you have a foreign policy designed by advanced capital economies to Africans. So this is really disadvantage. So I think it's really, really important that we really need to tackle our own challenges.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey, for raising all those points. Yeah, I think in terms of the recycling and the profit that can be made there, I think there definitely are a lot of challenges in terms of the economies of scale that are needed to make it profitable and to make it feasible if recycling isn't necessarily operating at the scale that's necessary within a country or within a particular region, particularly rural areas. I see we have had some comments in the Q&A box that refer to engaging with communities about additional uses for waste items, so not just recycling, but other ways that they can be reused. I think we are running a little bit out of time to go into those now. If you are able to email us those, we can definitely pass those along to the speakers, and we can definitely engage on that going forward. We are nearing the end of our scheduled time today, so I think let's maybe close with one of the questions that Anga, our youth coordinator, raised. Based on Jeffrey, what you said in terms of if you don't go with a goal, you can get lost in terms of the climate issues and the COP26 that you attended. One of the questions here is, I would love to know what goals do the speakers have for the next 5 years? So Jeffrey, Tebogo, would you like to maybe comment on that in terms of where you see yourself and the youth in 5 years in terms of plastics and climate?
All right, thank you very much. With regards to 5 years stuff about what do I actually see in terms of climate action, I think COP27, I'm beginning to see a drive in the momentum from African youth. I think they recently an African youth mobilization for COP initiative was actually launched, and I know for sure COP27 adaptation is really going to be one of the important topic, and also climate financing is really going to be important topic. Actually, I think we are actually pretty doing well. It's gradual, but yes, pervasive. What I will wish to see is the drive should still be there. We really need to unite. We really need to come together. For example, like I'm glad Anga reached out to me, and I'm seeing a session like this African Youth Dialogue, where I'm seeing diverse people from different countries. This is the type of example that we need to lead and move on towards COP and even beyond COP. So I think it's very, very important we keep up with dialogues like this to hear from stories from different people from different countries and what is really happening and how we can collaborate with each other and also advance climate action at the continental level. Thank
you, Jeffrey. Tebogo, do you want to comment at all before we close the session for today?
Thank you so much. I think for my 2 cents worth is just to say definitely more youth involvement in the next 5 years. Representation really matters. And as I previously said, that we need more Africans dealing with our African issues. And most importantly, Africans working together to help alleviate the impacts of climate change, not only in policy, but also in decision making. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tebogo, for the closing comments there. And a special thank you to everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to join this dialogue. So we will be having another 2 sessions next week, which will be Tuesday and Thursday. If you haven't already registered for those, we encourage you to do so. You can find the links to register on our SST events page, so Sustainable Seas Trust/events. We've got some really great speakers lined up for next week. For today, just to close off, just again a special thank you to our 2 presenters today and to Ken, our panelists, for taking the time to put together your presentation. I know it takes a lot of time and there's a lot of work that goes into it, and also thank you for the work that you're driving in your communities. It's really, really encouraging to hear all the wonderful things that are happening. So thank you, everyone. We'll close off here for today, and we hope to see you next time. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.